watching. Ask your questions in the text chat. I will relay them to Craig. Hi, William. Great to see you again. All right, Craig, please introduce yourself.
Cool. Yeah. So, name's Craig Silverstein. I kind of grew up in the entertainment industry and also the tech world. Slowly migrated more and more into the business operations of tech companies. Started my first tech company back in 2011, based around the entertainment industry. Um, got deeper and deeper into building global teams for post production, and then got more and more into software. Started a consulting business. Ended up joining a company called SyncSketch that does graphic design. Scaled them up. Started as a company with two co-founders in San Francisco, and had several contractors, and we ramped them up, became an industry standard in visual review for animation and gaming companies, and brought in a bunch of the major studios, ramped up pretty much every facet of that business, and got acquired by Unity Technologies, which is one of the biggest mobile game engines out there. If you're in the gaming industry or play mobile games, I'm sure you have heard of those guys. And now what I do is going back to consulting, and I realize with where AI is going and how powerful it is, why not create something that goes above and beyond what the big five consulting companies can do, and get more actionable strategic intelligence in the hands of companies that need it, typically mid market on up, but my roots are in startups. So I will always rally around behind really great ideas with really passionate founders, because that's me myself. I fit that profile as well. And right now we have done a little bit of a strategic, I don't want to call it a full pivot, but we repurposed our AI powered intelligence engine to be able to develop onboarding plans and operational plans for new hires. Typically, we're focusing on the executive level, but it can really work for any role in any type of company. We're industry agnostic. The whole idea is take that 6 month to a year ramp up period that new hires typically experience. And the higher up you go, the more critical the decision making and the higher impact those decisions at the strategic level can have on a company. So we really look to compress that 6 month to a year ramp up into a few weeks in terms of supplying the information that someone needs to start making very impactful decisions and providing value super fast. So that's called Minerva First Light. My company, our main product's Minerva Engine, and the company is the next unicorn.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, Boyan, welcome. Glad to see more people joining us over here. Bill, welcome over here too. Grayson as well. Um, those of you that are with us on Starmata, where we're broadcasting this from, feel free to raise your hand or use the text chat if you'd like to come up on stage, and I'll bring you up. You can use your microphone, camera optional, to ask questions or seek advice, feedback, whatever you got. Um, Everyone else, use the text chat. I will relay all your questions to Craig. And if there's something you're working on, you don't know how to form into a question, or you're not really aware of what the struggle might be, feel free to just share what you're working on and where you think the challenges are. And yeah, Craig's got a lot of wonderful experience on different ends of the business, whether it's an employee, a founder, co founder, advisor, investor, whatever. So you're in good hands. Don't be shy. That's like, the beauty of interacting with your peers and mentors. It helps you identify trouble areas that you have no idea are ahead of you, or helps you work through stuff that you're already faced with. So yeah, don't be shy. Um, while we wait for some questions to come in, because I see some people typing over in Discord, I did. Um, Craig, you've got a affinity to startups. It's what you kind of started with. I'm curious, when you're in your role with Unity and helping them with M&A, how did you apply your startup experience to uh, those situations, and also how are you able to kind of advocate these different opportunities with Unity when you were evaluating different deals or strategies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot to talk about and unpack in there, but I'll try to keep it as targeted as possible. I'll start with the differences, the kind of uh, situational shock that a lot of startups go through when being acquired by a larger company like Unity. I think their market cap was over 50 billion when they acquired SyncSketch, which was very, very, very tiny little piece of that revenue pie. But the big thing with SyncSketch, and it was like good and bad, where when I joined SyncSketch, they had to become enterprise ready to get these major studios involved. So that meant very, very well organized privacy policies with legal, data governance, security, all of those different things that seem more logistical in nature, and not very much product related. Now, when you join a new company, there's a good and bad, and I mean join a new company through an acquisition. There's a plus side, but there's actually also a downside for being so organized because as companies build themselves organically, their operations are naturally going to be different. Their policies are going to be different. The situations they go through, the governance of a company needs to align with both the user experience, the product, and the actual industry that they're in and the problems that they tackle. So there can be some growing pains. I remember when we joined Unity, one of the big things was like, wow, you're one of the most organized startups we've had with a lot of the frameworks you have in place. But at the same time, Unities were very different. So through the integration, and SyncSketch was one of a few companies I integrated into Unity, but the stronger you have things in place, also the bigger lift it's going to take to actually align with the acquirer. So I was very deep into aligning legal, our terms of service with Unity's terms of service, very integral in the financial reporting and buildup. I think on a daily basis for a few hours a day, I was interacting with their finance partners over in Unity. So there's a lot that goes into an acquisition. When you think of every function in a company, think about what would happen if you had to start revising these pretty big things within each function just to align with the acquire. And not all situations involve that. If you look at Microsoft and LinkedIn, when Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, they still run fairly independently. Of course, all of the revenue and things like that roll up probably as the parent company, Microsoft, but they left that acquisition and their operations and logistics alone for the most part. So everything's situational. It really depends on the acquirer and what their standards are and how fast a startup would need to realign with that. Um, in saying that, beyond the logistical things, if a company is acquiring a startup for a strategic reason, it's really important to understand the acquirer's products and services. I give an example very frequently with a company called Okta that does single sign-on for enterprise companies. They're in the app security space, and they acquired a company called Auth0. Now, Auth0 is what developers use to build in multi-factor authentication into apps and things like that. So their target is developers, where Okta targets more of the enterprises to do app management for these procurement teams and these operations. COO probably goes through and looks at how they're what apps they have, how many are duplicates, what they need to cut, things like that, but also the security aspect of it with the CTO. So when Okta acquired Auth0, it was a disaster because nobody understood the actual strategy of the operations. You had their sales teams, they tried to sell both products, and you have one product marketing to procurement and CTO and COOs. The other is for developers, typically smaller companies and completely different demographics, and nobody knew how to sell to one versus the other, or when to pitch in a sales meeting one versus the other, and it got very sloppy. So that's another thing to look at through an acquisition is what are the actual customers, what are the targets, and that's all the things that you think of as a startup individually. Who, how are you marketing, how are you interacting, what's the difference between selling a product into one group versus another, and what's the value offering. One thing that I was trying to push at Unity very strongly, and we didn't quite get there before I left, was how to organize products. If a company has multiple products or multiple tiers of things, how do you sell one product or a group of products so that that group of products drastically compounds value for your customer? So it's not about the individual products themselves, but what the products together can do to really change the game. And that's where you move from a tool to an enterprise solution. The deeper and higher value your products can ingrain in the company and add to the company, the much more profitable and much more valuable you'll be to them, and you become much stickier as well as a product.
I love all that. You touch on a whole bunch of different aspects of a lot of challenges that I'm seeing with like the people in the communities that I'm a part of. Like someone recently was just asking about essentially how to refine their product because they're struggling with monetizing it appropriately to a point where it's sustainable and allowing them to grow the company the way they want to grow the company. And they're definitely like struggling with the selling the product to the individuals in a workplace, like people in a very specific field, versus the employers of those people in that field,
Mhm.
right? And it's very much business to consumer in that respect because they're selling like individual licenses of people saying like in a field of art versus business to business where they're selling it to the employer who works in the field of art and employs a bunch of these people to do the art, right? So yeah, it's interesting hearing about this. And then you touched on also like how to essentially strategically seek out a larger organization for an exit and be more valuable to them, right? So yeah, I want to like touch on a couple of these topics, but we do have a great question from William over on Starmata here. Craig, it's in the text chat. I'll read it for people. Uh, William says, "I've been struggling with a challenging illness that has hampered my productivity over the past couple of years." Right there with you, William. "I have a couple active software projects with users, but they aren't generating revenue. I have two unreleased projects under development: an AI enabled knowledge management platform and a publishing platform, which are pretty far along in development. It's very hard for me to do anything other than my projects, but I can be highly productive on my projects aside from my illness. I am able to work on my projects for a couple hours a day, but it's hard for me to manage a lot of relationships for now. So going through a big fundraising process doesn't seem possible yet. I need to have personal income, but I'm not sure what to do. Am I just screwed until I can get healthy or get something launched?" What are your thoughts on this, Craig? What kind of advice would you have for someone with limited capacity for how they're able to engage with others to work towards these ambitions and make this these projects a viable business?
Yeah. First off, being passionate and continuing your projects while going through an illness is huge. Like, kudos to you for really still trying to drive your business and your projects forward under challenges. I know I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I have an impact all the time. Sometimes I'm minutes or hours away from death unless I grab a Gatorade and start chugging it during an event or something like that. So there's always interruptions that go on. And I think people who are resilient and overcome the health challenges that they're dealing with and continue with the business are they're a special breed of people, and they're going to be very, very successful if they continue to keep that resiliency that they have and really stay passionate and keep driving it forward. There are, and it's all situational. Looking at how do you get involved, how do you build yourself to a place to work with investors and things like that. And if you can't make it out to events, or let's say talk to investors, or schedule things on your calendar where you're out and about, look for virtual means to sync up with groups, whether there's things like 805 startup virtual events that might be going on, or other groups that are startup oriented that might be virtual. Now, those are can also be time consuming depending on what you're doing. But the big thing is looking at what opportunities are out there that fit your lifestyle that will also keep moving you forward. Because what you don't want to do is remain stagnant. I know if you have a really great idea and a really great project and you put it on the back burner for a little while, it could fade out and disappear. The more things kind of stay in the drawer without resurfacing and getting that, those both creative juices, but also that passion, the more likely it is to kind of fall by the wayside. So, being able to work on your projects and scheduling time to continue it, to get it to the point where you can talk to investors about it, you can create something as simple as a pitch deck or a PDF that really starts explaining what you're building towards, why you need funding to move forward, and what that funding is going to mean for the continuation and launch of your actual MVP. And I think in MVP, minimum viable product, which is what your projects are kind of gunning towards right now, keeping that as one of the biggest milestones you can have in the back of your head, something that could be tangible that a user or an investor, even if it's prototype stage and it's not quite, um, 100% launch ready, getting as close to that stage as possible is super important, because investors like to see something they can touch. They like to see, the current state of how people are dealing with things right now and how they could be, um, using solutions that will solve their problems. So continuing that path, and like I said, finding the steps, the support groups, the teams that will do it. But remember, in your situation, number one's your health. Without your health, you cannot do the rest of the things effectively. So health first, but schedule that time to continue with your projects, find the groups. And you know what? One thing that I think is really interesting, and I haven't looked into it myself, is are there groups with founders or with business owners or whatever, could be part of your network to move things forward? Do they already exist where it's people who have a certain illnesses or certain challenges, and they work together to be their own support system? That could be huge, because if that doesn't exist, not to put more work on your your plate or anything, but there, I'm sure, are other people like you that would love that type of support and that would come together to get a network going that can move things forward. So, um, yeah, and if not, getting a group like that together, um, different networks like 805 startups, and there's others out there. There's some for bigger companies like, Provisors and Association for Corporate Growth. If you join one of those or team up with one of those, you might also be able to just get some support for them. Maybe, events sponsored by them, or just tag their name on it, or a message that goes out to their networks. to get that support system of those like-minded, similar situations, similar types of founders. That's huge. So um, it's about finding the right support group and staying passionate about your projects. And like I said, don't remain stagnant. Keep moving forward, and that's big.
Yeah, I definitely mirror or mimic, repeat, echo. That's the word. Echo. I echo a lot of that. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth celebrating, William, the fact that you have had the passion and the the gumption to work on this. But it's also like understandable that, as you said, this is something that you've found yourself able to do while other things have been more challenging. I know how that goes for my own, like, health issues, and that been quite a struggle. But you know hopefully, as Craig's saying, also, you're seeking out that help, and you're finding support for your health. And it might not feel like it, because I've been dealing with this stuff for most of my life, but the last 6 years has been the worst. But looking back at this point I'm in right now to 6 years ago, it's like, oh my God, like, so much has improved. So much is just like amazing in comparison. But in comparison to where I am right now to where I was before things got real bad, it's still like, oh, like I'm still a long way away from where I was and where I'd like to be. So that kind of contrast can make things feel like it's not improving, and it's very difficult and things will never change. But again, if I'm looking back to where I was when things got real bad again, and now I'm on this upswing, it's like, no, 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 I'm making progress. There's hope. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I just got to stick with it and keep improving. And that's kind of like, this really difficult trick with a lot of this. And even if, like, without health issues and you're totally, you know, 100% able, you're the person that you want to be, and you're still working on something, it's always going to be a challenging, just in different ways, and it's going to affect you in different ways. And everyone has their own unique experiences that define what's a good thing or a bad thing or a mid thing. And it's just really important to, again, surround yourself with others where you can have that support. You can have that camaraderie with peers who have been through it before or struggling with their own things in their own way. And just remember, everyone's dealing with stuff. We're all human beings. And the way for us to move forward is camaraderie, by building these collaborative relationships, these healthy, authentic relationships with other people. And yes, there's a lot of bad people that are looking to, take advantage of different people, but that too, why it's so important to consistently try to find good people and surround yourself with more and more good people, because they help protect you from bad people trying to exploit you, right? Those are your friends. Those are your comrades who are going to stand up for you and have your back and help you identify potential risks, or help you move away from them and avoid them overall. So there's lots of, like, interesting things out there to help you with that. Just do your best not to put pressure on yourself to be too fast, and as long as you're prioritizing your well-being first, there's always opportunities to continuously work on what you want to work on, and slowly get it to the point, like Craig was saying, where it is a very attractive thing, a very inspirational thing for others to learn about what you've done up to this point, what you've struggled with, how you overcame it, and move forward, right? Like, all these things are speaking to your character, they're speaking to your ability to execute and get things done, and ultimately be someone who's able to express themselves through these different ideas that you want to bring to life. So I think it's all wonderful. Craig, we've got Grayson asking the next question over here. Do you think AI app builders are stable and trustworthy enough at this time to build your next mobile app via these AI companies and forgo traditional human programmers? I have a mobile app and not happy with my programmers, and due to cost, are based in India, so there are a lot of logistic challenges. I have a programmer who builds 100% AI and said he can convert my app via AI within a week, and I'm tempted to do so. I've got a lot of feelings and thoughts on this. Craig, what are yours?
Yeah. So this is a great topic, and it actually came up yesterday when I was at an event, and it comes up probably several times a week. And I'm going through the same thing myself, asking myself that question because I have a lot of automation that was built by a developer for my company. And also, it's not um, quite where I want it. And uh, the future of the product releases and things like that are they're what I'm thinking about on like, okay, how much AI development do I incorporate into what I'm building? And there's layers to this. And I'd say without knowing somebody's product and what their vision is for their product, the answer will always be it depends. Because you want to know um advanced are those AI platforms for development currently versus where are they going to be? So one of the big things that comes up is how much external control with either the server administration, um, the functionality, the security, all these different things. How well does an AI platform actually handle what's important for every piece of what you're building? And on a positive side, I'd say a year ago, I wouldn't even think about it using an AI platform because everyone was saying the same thing. And I hadn't really, I messed around with them a little bit. I started building some of the front end design of some applications. But um, what I kept hearing was that it's great for prototyping, but it's not very scalable and things fall apart once you actually hit that go live button where you start ramping up with all these customers, then things get crazy. And I believe that was true a year ago. And I believe that very complex applications would do very poorly um, using those platforms versus having that more customized DevOps team that's actually building out very specific features, functionality, frameworks, infrastructure that is all conducive to the way the app's actually running and conducive to scale. And I think being conducive to scale is one of the most important things because if you build a great app but you can't scale it to a bunch of customers, it's going to be very problematic and very expensive in the long run to fix those types of issues. If they can be fixed, because the fix might be moving out of an AI platform and moving into that more customized DevOps build with teams. I know you mentioned teams in India versus here, and how there's even logistical challenges beyond regular expenses. And that's always a factor too, because DevOps teams need a product manager. They need somebody who can help organize and manage those teams of developers. On a positive note, what I have heard about platforms is starting to change. I'm hearing a lot from CTOs that both the tools and the platforms are advancing to be more conducive to scale. I haven't used those platforms recently myself, but that's one thing that I'm excited to try because now I'm hearing more positive feedback. I know people are saying Lovables come a long way where more infrastructure can be built outside of the actual platform itself or connect to it so that it can all work together and be more customized to what people actually need. And things like that are very promising because if you can't get past those hurdles, companies like Lovable are really shutting out a ton of market share that they could otherwise acquire by being more flexible in how people build on their platform. So I think I'm interested to test it. If you go out and test it, what I plan to do actually in the next couple of weeks is block out time every single day to start seeing how easy and how quickly things can be replicated and built out to transition maybe from more of a DevOps, whether things are being built in Django and other systems, and maybe roll into one of these other platforms. But one of the other things as well is the tools more than just the platforms themselves. I know CTOs, DevOps engineers, everyone who is incorporating AI tools into their processes for speed. They might not be 100%, but that's something where if you're a technical person, you can fix what AI misses. So there's efficiency gains to that, and productivity gains. But again, it all has to be conducive to what you're building. If you're building something that's gonna end up running into a brick wall, then you need to find a different, better way to do it before it starts getting expensive.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Dr. Paxmore has some comments added from Twitch. Uh, Grayson, short answer, no. Long answer, no. If you know how to program, the LLMs are going to be far worse than even a mediocre human programmer. Most likely, they are already using Claude. But if you don't know what AI is doing, you won't know why it is going wrong and when it's going wrong, and it will go wrong. Does your app have user profiles, login data? Do you know how databases work? Are you using a database? How is data encrypted? Is it encrypted, etc.? So very much like similar vein from this. I would also also say you know this idea of the programmers the cost, right? Like if you're building a business, it's so important to, before you start building anything, paying anyone, to do the financial model and understand what those expenses will be and where those expenses should be going and what you're getting back from it, where you're making that investment into your business. And you got to account for where the investments are creating liability and risk, because liability and risk is likely to cost you a lot more time and money down the line, maybe result in consequences that are materially bad, whether that's paying hefty fines or going to jail, right? So for everyone listening, just make sure you take the time, go through the steps before you start doing anything to really understand the costs. And some costs are worth the price. And that might mean you go slower because you need to save up more money, or you need to find other ways to access capital, maybe through grants or something else. Whatever it is, it's better to go slow and steady if you're doing things in a way that's limiting or controlling your risk and liability, possibly eliminating that, because you'll end up with a higher quality business, a bit deeper understanding of how to operate that business and grow that business, than if you just go rushing ahead and start getting people to build stuff. So just try to be aware of this. Lawyers, CPAs, super helpful. Don't overlook speaking with them. Financial accounting classes, just for lots of free ones out there. Recommend them. University provided ones, not just like some random who knows what from some guru type of thing, but actual legitimate educational sources. It'll all be helpful. But yeah, like again, using AI for this, if you don't understand what it's doing, or if you don't have someone on your team who does understand how it functions, it could create a lot of risk and liability. So yeah, um,
Yeah.
there is a
To
follow. Oh, okay, go for it.
J- just real quick um to add on to that a little bit and to support Dr. Paxmore's idea here. It's like anything, right? You want to understand, and it's why people are so afraid of LLMs right now, because if you don't understand the root of how something works, you're going to be missing a lot of important steps and the integrity is going to fall apart at some point. So it is important, if you yourself don't understand the root of how an LLM works. And I know that's one of the big things, because I'm more of a business person than a technical person. I had to teach myself and I had to learn and talk to people. I started talking to people from MIT and other people who were in the thick of how AI is evolving and how LLMs are being built. And that type of insight is super important. But as a CEO of a company, I'm not the CTO. So I also need technical support where I can get it to make sure that the integrity of my systems don't fall apart. So knowing that root knowledge and the foundational ways systems work and the technology works is super important. And I think Dr. Paxmore had a really, really good point with that.
Love it. Grayson has a follow up question, but we'll get to that in just a moment because we got two other questions to touch on first. And I think it's enough of like a standalone question that it's good to circle back to. So, John Paulson, welcome, asks Craig, I generally enjoy reading books spanning accounting, business, economics, etc., and looking up legal text, statutes to understand terms in the world of business, econ, finance, accounting, etc. E.g., what is a franchise? What is performance obligation, etc. However, I feel like there are many terms in the business world that those from that world don't easily define, either on their company website, in business newspapers, journals, and books, or other sources. E.g., what is a bank such what is a bank such as an inventory bank, sales bank, order bank, etc.? Terms that are common parlance in certain segments of the business world but don't seem to be easily defined. How can one find out what the term bank means in this specific context? Other terms might include the market. Pricing in a go to source for me is Investopedia, but it doesn't cover all of these terms necessarily. What are your thoughts? So, yeah, this is a really good question because, especially in business, there are so many different definitions of the same terms, but even more obnoxious to me personally is acronyms. You see the same acronym like TAG, and it can be defined like 40 different times or different ways as you go from one field to another field, one industry to another industry. And marketing people, business people, they love to use acronyms and terms. And it's, yeah, again, often lacking the unique context of what that specifically means. So, Craig, how do you do this sort of research to educate yourself and understand what's going on?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer this question in two parts because I feel like I've seen a higher growth rate of more weird language being used in things. And I actually think that's partly because of AI. So I create intelligence reports for companies and assets that are, like I said, like helping new hires onboard and giving them nonsense language and nonsense words is very, very, it's going to do more harm than good if those words in that language isn't consistent, isn't an industry standard, and used well. So I think part of the issue why we're seeing more of this is because people are using AI and not human editors to really get the language right and the business models right. But then there are other um, other situations where, yeah, a different industry or a different segment uses different language. SaaS, which is an acronym itself, and there's a billion different acronyms in the SaaS world, which is software as a service, can be very different than manufacturing. Manufacturing probably has its own whole set of things, and I think a lot of the like inventory bank and these other banks that are all have to do more with manufacturing, which is why I haven't seen those a lot, unless they were just randomly created by AI to infiltrate things. But I I'm much more in the software space, but I do think and my products right now are industry agnostic. So sometimes when I see certain things, I had to tweak my LLMs and my systems to stop using acronyms, use the full thing. If you're giving material to someone who's being hired at a new company, whether it's an industry standard or not, you don't want to take the chance of that acronym being completely misinterpreted or waste somebody's time for having to look something up. So I think part of the problem isn't you as a reader, part of it is the people who are creating this material who still use acronyms without defining them well. And one way that I solve that in my own reports is that if there are any acronyms inside of an asset that we're delivering, it's all completely defined somewhere in an appendix that has every single acronym spelled out and defined specifically for a user. So they don't have to deal with this whole research problem that you're going through. So for companies, any companies out there listening to that, please take that advice of define things for your people or don't use nonsense words or acronyms. The other part is the knowledge and the research, and I'm always looking up terms, words, different things, or discovering new terminology through reading because I love to read as well. Um, And the process there really is looking up the words, looking up what they mean, where they come from. I'm a huge fan of self educating. So I'm constantly reading books as well, constantly looking at different courses that exist, all these different things. And even though I've been in business for a super long time, business evolves and changes so fast that it's one of those things where if you stop, you will get left behind. You always have to see how business models are evolving and that blue ocean environment. And by blue ocean, I mean highly innovative products that disrupt a sector or a market. You look at Netflix, who was the first streamer and the first streamer for a while. They were so advanced and shook up the market so um, so rigorously that it took a while for any other company or any other entertainment company to catch up to what they had done. um, and look at all the terminology and things that came from that. So that's all about understanding how markets evolve and staying up with the terminology there. But it's why I read. The more you read, I mean, you're going to have to look stuff up if it just doesn't make sense to you. Um, where to look that up can depend. Sometimes I'll just Google a word and it won't give me the right context. So I need to reframe what I'm saying. Anything you put into an LLM, give it context first, because the more specific you are with how something's being used, the better the chance of it actually being answered more accurately. So that's the best advice I could say is you're doing good things by self-educating constantly. And when you educate and you learn by self-education, you're going to come across things you don't understand more frequently because it's not just a curriculum that a university has set up where they know what students aren't going to know yet because they know all of the grade levels that came before that. It's different. You run into the unknowns. It makes you feel a little uncomfortable, makes you realize how much maybe you don't know, and but you keep moving forward. And once you learn it, you level up, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I do want to go back to what we were talking about with William though, in terms of like where to look these things up and research these things. Peers, mentors, just anyone that you know works in that field, that industry, that market, lives it, breathes it every day. Reach out to someone like that. That's what LinkedIn's great at. You don't need to have a connection with someone. You don't need to know who they are. They don't know they don't need to know who you are or have a reason to respect who you are based on how accomplished you are. You could be a 11-year-old kid just curious, right? That's a beautiful thing. Someone's curious, right? Um, so sharing that passion, that curiosity with other people, you're more likely than not to make them feel empowered and inspired because now they can play a role in your education in helping you and sharing their passion, their experience, their insights with you, right? So if you're in need of something like that and you don't have anyone that you know of in your circle already, just find people on LinkedIn or any other social, whatever it is, send them a connection request, or if you pay for LinkedIn, send them a DM because you can do that without being connected, and just say, hey, I'm currently learning this. Um, I'm not really sure what this means, but I saw that you are working in this. You've worked in this. I really I respect your experience in this, and it means so much to me if you could just just let me know what this means. Help me out, right? Something real simple, but you do that in a respectful way. You do that in a way that's concise. You do that in a way that isn't asking for a big favor. It's something they can spend literally like 90 seconds just, oh, that means this. No problem. There you go, right? That's a beautiful thing. And yeah, don't be worried about not getting a response or someone not wanting to respond or saying, hey, leave me alone. That happens too. Some people are just busy and they got other things going on, whatever. But you send off like a few of those messages, you'll get a response. You'll eventually get a response. And that person you connect with that gave you the response Now you know something. Now you know this person has the capacity to give you support, but they're also like willing to give you support. So later down the line, if you need more support, you can go back to that person and be like, "Hey, I really appreciated what you did. You answered that question for me. I came across this other thing. You know, I'd love to like learn a little bit more from you. If you got time, could you let me know about this? Or do you know someone else that like I can ask? Do you know a place where I can go, right? Like where's a course or whatever it is. It's just another way to further develop that relationship with this person as a mentor, right? And you're not ever asking them to be a mentor. You're just engaging them as if they are a mentor. And you're doing that respect because you understand you're asking for a favor from this person, right? And maybe it's an opportunity for you, like, you know what? I've got some extra money saved. I don't want to be wasting their time. I'll offer them to like, if they like, willing to give me like, 30 minutes of their time, I'll kick them like, like $50, right? Or maybe I'll ask them to grab coffee with me, spend 20 minutes with me grabbing coffee, food and drinks on me, whatever they want. I just really appreciate you, right? These are wonderful ways to develop relationships, real relationships with other people that you admire, you look up to, you can get support from, whatever it is. So don't rule that out. Don't be so isolating. Don't isolate yourself, especially if there's, AI alternatives to getting that connection. Don't fall into those traps. They're great as supplemental tools, but they're not meant to be the tool. Keep that in mind. All right, Craig.
Uh, Gary, I just want to let you know someone on LinkedIn messaged me and said the link's not working to enter the event. It says it's going to start soon.
That's very weird because I'm watching the live feed right now. So just let them know
Um,
to they can go to the main page and they should be able to find it. Or hang on,
Here,
I'll
are you able
put
to put the link in the chat? I'll post it
yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
LinkedIn feed.
Let me
Cool.
grab those real quick for you. But yeah, while I'm doing that, Grayson had another question, which was a follow up. Or actually, wait. Well, Grayson will get you next. Let me get to Tim first. Okay, so Tim asked, question: I'm using the next 3 to 6 months to be in a focused founder mode, and I'm reorganizing my personal messaging around it. How do you lift yourself out of the view of an IC and prepare yourself to speak to others in a different mindset? I worry that shifting away from IC may wreck my chances to make money on the background or back end, or ever return to IC should I fail. IC is an acronym which has not been defined yet for everyone. So, Tim, can you define what IC is for everyone? And then I'll share it. So that'd be wonderful. Tim's typing. I love that we had a conversation about terminology and and um, and acronyms before this. Tim says, I see independent contributor.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So, Craig, what do you got while I get those links for you?
All right. So let me just refocus to make sure I can answer this correctly. How do you lift yourself out of the view of an individual contributor and prepare yourself to speak to others in a different mindset? So, yeah, this is definitely a question geared um, towards, kind of leveling up with your personal mindset and personal growth and how to interact with others. Let me know if I'm not getting this right, by the way, Tim. But um, so the the biggest thing with mindset between independent contributors, or I'm going to use, and I don't know if it's the same thing in large companies that I've been a part of. There's individual contributors, they call them, and then there's more strategic level people manager, kind of higher strategic thinking, things like that. So let me know if that's not fully right. Those kind of two different modes of operating um, in a company. But um, being individual contributor does not necessarily mean what you want to do is work on those higher level skills, mindset, and ways of thinking. Um, that kind of strategic mindset. enhance that while you're an individual contributor. I can go through like one of the really weird things when Sync Sketch was acquired by Unity was that I went from running a company of about 25, 30 people to being an individual contributor because my role within Unity changed from managing Sing Sketch to this very weird placement. And it was a kind of jarring. And it was the reverse of leveling up in terms of mindset. It went from strategic to operational and integration. So the thing is you want to be good at both, but when you level up and start thinking about things that are strategy related, there are a few skills that are going to be super important. One is delegation, and that's going to help you as a founder. You have to be able to delegate things and understand what you have the capacity and skills to do, and what you need to start bringing or putting on the plate of other people. And as you do that, one of the most important things that you're going to have to do let me here, I'm just going to paste these links in this copy link address. Yeah, I just wanted to throw these links that Gary just posted into this chat. Um, so as you start thinking about how to delegate different tasks and skills to other people, you need to start thinking of your long term vision. And that's the more strategic way things are going to operate. And by strategic, I mean not the specific operations, but how everything is working together to compound value. Okay, that's good that I'm kind of hitting for yourself, but more okay. So Tim said, love this current advice, by the way. Less so mindset for yourself, but how to market yourself as a founder to an audience that only knows or has hired you as an IC. Got it. I think part of it is understanding a problem very well. And when you can talk to people that have that problem, it gives you credibility when they can see that you understand them. And if you get that within your marketing context, and sorry for those of you that have been listening and all of a sudden I changed topic, it's because I read Tim's actual um, clarification of his question. So I just did a pivot, but I don't think I said, okay, let's address this part of the question before I just started going off in that other direction. So that's why I started talking about this. But how, as a founder, can you talk to people and have the credibility and build that trust with them, and then be able to use that with marketing and build that kind of uh, reputation for being the guy? Like right now, in a lot of circles, I'm the AI powered business intelligence guy or market intelligence guy. And how do you do that? One thing is get out there and go to events and meet people and build your network. And one is talk the language of those people, understand their problems as it relates to the product that you're building, and form those relationships and listen to what other people are saying. Because, and that's one of the big things I go to events for, is to listen to the problems that other people have, the industries that they're in, and try to connect the dots on how that might interact with me and my products. But by having people talk about themselves, sounds weird, but it builds credibility for yourself. The more people give information to you and the more they socialize with you just being a good listener, the more that bridge of trust builds. So once you understand the problems and experiences of the people that you talk to at these events, when you do have a point where you can provide some value to them, they'll trust you more for having been a good listener. So when you go and listen and you start talking back with these people, telling them about your product, mentioning their experiences that they shared with you along the way to build that that kind of uh trust and experience and journey, and now you're describing your product in their context, and they have the context of what you do and you have the context of what they do, there's going to be a lot of trust there. I'm trying to think of conversations in the conference that I was just at in Los Angeles. It was a conference with investors, and there were lots of private equity firms, lots of family offices, different investor vessels like that. And it's really about understanding what they invest in. I think somebody talked to me for about an hour about them acquiring distressed assets like hotels and retirement communities and things like that. And I was listening and listening and listening, and they started talking about how it's a real problem for them hiring new hotel managers or new people to oversee these properties because they need to familiarize themselves with all these problems. And I let him go and go and go. And then I was started describing what I do with kind of compressing that onboarding time of executives or any type of role. And he's like, you know what? This is really interesting. So he started applying that to the context of what he was telling me. And it provided a lot of credibility without me having to try to sound like an expert. It was all about the context and things like that. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's a little bit of a ramble there. But
No, it was good, and it does bring us to Grayson's question, which going back up to it was, I'm a female founder, and I still hear on why 4% of female founders get funded. Women are $1 trillion influencers and spenders. Why do you think that still is the case? So yeah, so essentially, I might be like misreading some of this because like a little bit of grammar, but um, yeah, despite it sounds like despite women being $1 trillion force in terms of influencers and spenders in the marketplace as a whole, they only get 4% of funding. So yeah, as investor, having just gone to this conference that's focused on investing, was there any insights? Do you have any opinions, thoughts on why that is?
yeah, and just a heads up, I have a hard out in like
Oh
5 minutes.
my
So
goodness.
I'm gonna try to tackle this quickly, but I think
The patriarchy sucks is the answer, but I'm
yeah,
sure there's other nuances behind all this, but that's the ultimate thing. But yes, go on.
yeah. No, I mean my thought is that society has a long way to go to understand what really brings value to industries, to things like that. And a lot of times the uh the people that are running things, or the people that have the money or the power, they have biases from the way they've always conducted business and the way they've always done things, and those biases are very hard to break unless there's a new path. And I have to say, one of the most important things, and it's one of the big rules in sociology that they I learned in university. I was a sociology undergrad, and the way you change a system like that, or something that doesn't seem quite fair or just, or is just the way, and it's one of the phrases I hate so much, is the way things have always been, or we've always invested in companies run by men with these great ideas and doing all these things. I mean, the I always say, like, that's great if that's the way things have always been, but just because you've always done things that way does not mean that's the only way, and does not mean that's the best way. So I think one of the big things, and once again, this is taught in universities with sociology, in order to change a system from doing things one way to another, it's not about fighting the system that exists. It's about creating a new system and way of doing things that people gravitate towards because it's better and people can see the results. They can be a part of that type of community, and that community is gaining traction, and people can believe in it. So keep doing that part of the fight, not fighting against the system, but helping build the new system, the new way of doing things that's very attractive, where people that are part of the old system from the outside looking in can see, wow, look at this female founder who built this enterprise, who started doing things. And there are examples of it, but it's not quite the movement that it needs to be to start changing those metrics yet. So I'd say keep looking at how to build this new system, how to build it with people, how to get traction behind it. And I'm not that much of a technical sociology buff to be doing it, but I know Gary just posted a women's economic ventures group. There are groups out there. I think the big thing to get traction among those groups and actually cause systemic change is to really continue to build out this new way of doing things and standardize it and make sure people see the results. And you know what? You could be loud about it, but as you're being loud about it, make sure you're not fighting the old system, because that will cause the old system to double down on the way things have always been. And you want to show them that that is not actually the way to do things.
Yeah, the unfortunate like reality for something like this is because it is so rooted in just the god awful design of the patriarchy and racism and bigotry and all these things that are ultimately, about those who already have power and, wealth and capital to maintain that and hoard more of it at the expense of human beings. There are so many different systems at play, and it's going to be extremely difficult. But yeah, like Craig's saying, there are ways to absolutely seek out or start these other movements, these other alternatives in whatever capacity you can. Whether that's a female founder group that you start with just you and like a few other women that you already know, and then you start to slowly invite other women that they know into the group. So again, it goes back to that camaraderie. You have comrades who are sharing in your struggle, sharing in your ambitions and goals, not just the individual like personal goals of like I want a successful business. We all want successful businesses. But no, we want a better place to live and exist in and be a part of as as part of like this societal structure, right? But then seeking out others who are already making headway and doing these things is wonderful too, and giving yourself over to them to be a volunteer, to be a contributor, a donor, whatever capacity you have. And it doesn't be a lot. It doesn't need to be super consistent either. It's like it could be like popping in once a year and sharing what you can of your own experiences and ideas to help like improve the things that they are providing as an alternative to these other systems that are exist. Or it could be something that's much more dedicated. Maybe you like apply for a role as like a board of directors or something, right? It's totally like up to you to figure out what feels right, what's a good match. And I said this in the text chat while Craig, you were talking earlier. This idea of success is so much a matchmaking game. Who you hire, who you take money from, who your customers are, all these things. It's about finding the best possible match where your values, your culture, your mission are all in alignment together. That way you're all on the same page and working towards something that you share and feel good about and can really like, rally around. So hopefully that helps a little bit more. Craig, I know you got a hard stop. Do you
Yeah.
have any final thoughts, anything you want to announce and share with the community before you go?
No, I know this time usually I can go over quite a bit, but if you still have questions or still want to talk things through or whatever you need, don't be afraid to reach out over LinkedIn or shoot me a message and we could sync up. Also happy later in the week or next week if we want to hop on another, if there's a lot more questions that weren't answered, we can always do an ad hoc session to rally back and get some more information to everyone. So yeah, no, excited to continue talking about this stuff. They're great questions today, and hopefully it was helpful.
It's always helpful for me, at least. I love having you on. Yeah, I definitely see like there's a lot of thank yous from Grayson, Tim, others. Yeah, Dr. Paxmore with an enjoyable little commentary. William says thank you. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and being so generous with it. And yeah, I'd love to have you back sooner than later. I'll be in touch. Yeah, I'm working on the next VIP lunch, so be aware.
Yeah,
Yeah,
next week, right?
yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Boyne. See you
All right.
soon. Thank you everyone for being so brave with asking questions and putting yourself out there. Thank you, everyone. All right. Have a great rest of the week. It's almost the weekend.